Chapter 22. A lover on the left, a sinner on the right. Check the rest of the house, Amelia ordered. Years of training started to kick in. See how they got in. We need to know if there's more of them. She hoisted up the hem of her dress, retrieving her Beretta 92FS from a thigh holster. She had received it while working in the United States. She wasn't entirely sure why the CIA had given it to her, but she wasn't going to pass on an opportunity for a new gun. Although getting across seas has been rather painful, even with Mycroft's help on the paperwork. Pulling out a magazine from her blazer pocket, she loaded it, then turned off the safety, Irene watching in mild interest. Well, said Sherlock, flipping the phone in the air, that's the knighthood in the bag. Amelia raised her eyebrow. Don't be cocky. Ah, Irene eyed the phone, mouth going dry as Sherlock nonchalantly tossing and catching it. And that's mine. She stuck her hand up, taken aback when Sherlock ignored her and turned it on. I am blanked locked appeared on the screen, the phone demanding the password. Irene could hardly contain her smile. All the photographs are on here, I presume, Amelia said, letting out a heavy sigh. Irene was quick to assure her. I have copies, of course. No, you don't, Sherlock said as soon as Irene had finished speaking. You'll have permanently disabled any kind of uplink or connection, unless the contents of this phone are probably unique, and you wouldn't be able to sell them. She lowered her outstretched hand, realizing that she was not going to be getting her phone back. Who said I'm selling? Well, Amelia nudged one of the bodies littering the floor. Why would they be interested? Whatever's on the phone it's clearly not just photographs. She hesitated for a moment before turning on her Beretta's safety and tucking it away. The camera phone is my life, Miss Watson, Irene said, voice taking on a metallic edge. I'd die before I let you take it. She leaned in, keeping Amelia's gaze. It's my protection. Sherlock, Ames, John called from upstairs. Amelia caught the phone in midair before Sherlock could catch it. It was, she corrected, turning it over in her hand. Amelia handed it back to Sherlock. Go see what John wants. I need a moment. Sherlock hesitated, but then left the room, flashing a compliant smile at Irene. You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Watson, Irene warned her. You'd best be careful. Amelia pushed her hair away from her face. And you're playing against a dangerous opponent, she replied. What makes you think you can win? Irene had Amelia's left arm before she could defend herself, yanking Amelia's blazer sleeve up to reveal the tattoo underneath. I know what this means, Miss Watson, she hissed, eyes flashing. Amelia laughed, but it was shaky, and she didn't sound as confident as she wanted to be. And pray tell, what does it mean? It means, Irene started. You know who he is, and you know that he is more dangerous than any of us. Do not take his game so lightly. She pulled her arm out of Irene's grasp and pulled her sleeve down with trembling fingers. You're not telling me anything that I don't already know, said Amelia. If you know all of this, then you should be as far away from him as possible, Irene said. She revealed her right wrist, where there was a small, nearly invisible tattoo of a spade symbol with an A in the center, done in white ink. Amelia wondered if Sherlock had noticed it, but upon reflecting on the events at a later time, she would realize that Irene Adler had cleverly kept her wrist hidden from Sherlock. Don't make the same mistake I did, Miss Watson. Amelia swallowed at this new revelation. He marked you, which means you know that isn't possible. He will find each and every single one of us in the end, and if you try to run, the punishment will only be worse. Irene's eyes traveled towards Amelia's forearm briefly. Left arm and in black ink. You were certainly very important to him. His third? His second, Amelia corrected. After what happened, he wanted to keep me close, and I'd like to think I'm still important to him. Perhaps not in the same way, but he's certainly infatuated with me now. I like attention, but not his attention, Irene nodded. Few of us do. But Connell was the only one who ever enjoyed it. Miss Watson, you never should have returned to this country. She shook her head. It's not safe for you either, but we can handle ourselves, can't we? Amelia didn't wait for her answer and marched upstairs, ready to draw her gun at any moment. When she heard John and Sherlock quietly muttering to each other, Amelia relaxed. She's unconscious, Sherlock. We should call an ambulance, John said in a hushed tone. Don't be absurd. The police are already on their way. I imagine they'll be bringing an ambulance as well. They did hear several gunshots, after all. Someone might be hurt. But they aren't. How on earth are they supposed to know that, John? If they're a bunch of dimwits who are only half good at their job like the people at Scotland Yard are. John hit him. Sherlock? Yes, Yes, Sherlock, Amelia said, walking in. Don't criticize the people who might one day save your life. She frowned, making her way to the bedroom, stopping when she saw the large open window. Talk about a security fault. Must have come in through this way. Sherlock was behind her in moments, clearly. It's all right, John said as Irene entered the room, seeing the way she eyed Kate's unconscious body in concern. She's just out cold. Irene relaxed. Well, God knows she's used to that. I don't even want to know what that means, Amelia said. I'm going to go downstairs. I have a call to take, she said, started dialing Mycroft's number before she'd finished speaking, and rushing back downstairs, too. As Amelia would later describe it, give him hell. Good, Irene said. She turned to John. There's the back door. Better check it, Dr. Watson. Why don't you accompany your sister? John waited for Sherlock's approval, which he signified with a nod, then joined Amelia downstairs. She was shouting venomously into her phone. Her cries of anger turned into violent hisses upon seeing her brother. What the hell, Mycroft? He could hear Amelia say. Were those CIA agents? Why the hell were they after me? I swear to God, if this is your fault... She paused only to listen to Mycroft's response. I don't give a damn if you don't know why they are here. Figure it out. That's your job, isn't it? You're the one with the connections, and it's not exactly like I can exactly call the president. I'm on a case you put me on, actually. Another pause. Oh, for God's sake, Mycroft, I was nearly killed. I'm sure you can spare some time from your supposed filling. And come on. We both know you're not filling, unless your filling cabinet sounds like a treadmill. Sherlock looked at Irene with an intense curiosity. You're very calm, he observed. She didn't seem to understand, so he clarified with a, your booby did just kill a man. Hey, he would have killed me, she said. She was unfazed. It was self-defense in advance. Sherlock huffed, starting to like the woman before him. That was his first mistake. Irene ran her hand down his arm to momentarily distract him, and then stabbed him with the syringe she so carefully kept concealed from him while he'd been talking. He was taken by surprise, struggling to grab at the syringe. What? He said, the contents of the syringe causing him to slur. What is that? What? Then Irene slapped him, sending Sherlock tumbling to the floor. Give it to me, she ordered, sticking her hand out. Now! Give it to me. His vision blurred, the room starting to spin. He tried and failed to get to his feet, but looked at her with defiance. No. That was his second mistake. Irene's patience was thinning. Give it to me, she said, starting to sound desperate. No, he repeated. That was his third and final mistake. He had no time to make any more, for Irene walked back to her vanity and picked up her riding crop. Oh, for goodness sake, she said, drop it. She held the riding crop out at Sherlock, sighing when Sherlock continued struggling to get up. She hit him, said, another hit, drop it. Sherlock collapsed, body refusing to cooperate with his demands. Thank you, dear. Irene picked up the fallen phone. Now tell that sweet little posh thing that pictures are safe with me. They're not for blackmail, just for insurance. I know she's just dying to report back to your brother. She put her phone in the pocket of Sherlock's coat. Besides, I might want to see her again. Sherlock scowled at the thought of Irene and Amelia, and tried to arise once more. Oh, no, Irene chastised, pushing Sherlock down with her riding crop. It's been a pleasure. Don't spoil it. She stroked the sides of his face with the leather crop, a coy smile dancing upon her blood-red lips. This is how I want you to remember me. The woman who beat you. Good night, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. As it was always with Amelia in her horrible timing, she chose that moment to walk in, John trailing after her. Jesus! She exclaimed as Irene started to escape through the bathroom window. What are you doing? He'll sleep for a few hours, said Irene, pausing her attempted departure as John rushed to Sherlock's side. Make sure he doesn't choke on his own vomit. It makes for a very unattractive corpse. John saw the syringe on the floor and picked it up. What's this? He demanded. What have you given him? Sherlock! He tapped the detective's face, trying to get him to stay conscious. He'll be fine, Irene assured. I've used it on loads of my friends. Amelia was livid, but she had more pressing concerns. She crouched by Sherlock. Sherlock, can you hear me? You know, Irene said, directing her message to John. I was wrong about him. He did know where to look. John faced her. For what? What are you talking about? The key code to my safe, answered Irene. What was it? Irene smiled at Amelia and Sherlock, although it barely resembled an expression of happiness or mirth, but rather one of contempt and concise. Well, shall I tell him? Irene paused for effect, police sirens starting to shriek in the distance. My measurements. With those words, she rolled backward out of the window, John sprinting over to the window to see Irene disappear into a sleek black car with no license plate. They heard the door being kicked in downstairs, a small team of armed policemen and a group of paramedics swarming into the building. Amelia pointed to Sherlock, then said to John, Watch him. John nodded. Amelia stepped out onto the stairwell, hands raised above her head. Amelia Watson, National Security Advisor, MI5. I called. Thank God you're here, she said to the paramedics. My friend, she figured that was a logical reason as to why should we be so concerned about Sherlock. That was what people who weren't government spies, or Sherlock Holmes for that matter, had. It's passed out upstairs. My brother's currently with him, but we don't know what to do. You said there's been a shooting? Said a police officer, not lowering her weapon as the paramedic rushed upstairs. Yes, downstairs. There is a gun in a safe. Amelia was starting to get really tired. It went off when he opened it because we got attacked by several Americans. It's all very complicated and actually classified. I can show you my badge if you'd like. That will not be necessary, a cool voice said from the doorway. I can personally account for the validity of your identity. Mycroft's Holmes stepped into the house, and at last the guns trained on Amelia were lowered. So, Miss Watson, do you honestly think you'll have the photographs by the end of the day? Sherlock was sitting in Phil's car. He wasn't entirely sure how he got there, but he had no time to ponder the validity of the situation he was in, for Irene slammed her hands down on the car door. Got it, she exclaimed. She held up a finger in protest as he tried to open his mouth to demand for her to let him out. Oh, shush now. Don't get up. I'll do the talking. She walked to the back of the car, crouching to examine the exhaust pipes. So the car's about to backfire. She straightened, and suddenly she and Sherlock were in the field alongside the hiker, whose head was raised to the sky, as though he were searching for something. In the hiker, he's staring at the sky. Amelia's image appeared out of nowhere. Now, Amelia said he could be watching the birds, but he wasn't, was he? It occurred to Sherlock that perhaps he was the only one able to see Amelia. Of course he wasn't, Image, Amelia scoffed. Irene didn't hear her, walking around the hiker and following his gaze. He was watching another kind of flying thing, said Irene. The car backfired, and the hiker turns to look. The hiker snapped his gaze away from the sky and looked back at the car over her shoulder. A small object flying into the back of the hiker's head, killing him almost instantaneously. Which was his big mistake, Irene continued. She looked to the road. By the time the driver looks up, the hiker's already dead. What he doesn't see is what killed him because it's already being washed downstream. Image, Amelia, Sherlock, and Irene turned to the river, where an ornately decorated boomerang was nestled among the mud and weeds. An accomplished sportsman recently returned from a foreign travel with a boomerang, Irene concluded proudly. You and Amelia got that from one look? Definitely the new sexy. Sherlock sputtered and looked around in confusion. His bed rose up to meet him from behind, the sheets wrapping themselves around him in an invisible force. Hush now, said Irene, bending over him. Sherlock's room came into focus. It's okay. I'm only returning your coat. Amy was the first word to leave Sherlock's mouth as he awoke, finding himself in his bed back at Baker Street. Then louder. Amy! She stirred from her sleep-like state on the living room sofa, treading to the bedroom she shared with Sherlock. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes, only to find Sherlock falling off the bed, too groggily to walk properly. She watched him, amused, then said, You okay? How did I get here? Sherlock questioned in a low murmur. Well, I don't suppose you remember much, Amelia said. You weren't making a lot of sense. Oh, I should warn you, I think Lestrade filmed you on his phone. Where is she? Sherlock was suddenly on his feet. She furrowed her eyebrows. Where's who? The woman, he replied cryptically. That woman! Amelia ground her teeth, exasperated. What woman? Sherlock, I understand you've been drugged and all, but now really isn't the time for this. Sherlock stumbled aimlessly around the room. The woman, he said, voice growing insistent. The woman. What, Irene Adler? Amelia said. She got away. No one saw her. Her eyes followed Sherlock as he continued to trip around the room, managing to make his way to the open window, gazing out through it. She wasn't here, Sherlock. He half dropped, half fell to the floor as he searched under the bed for Irene. All he found was a clump of two's fur and several dust bunnies. What are you? Amelia asked in confusion. What? No. She dragged Sherlock back to bed, his face in the pillow. Back to bed. She covered him with the sheets, then whistled for the dog, who waddled in on his squat legs. She picked him up with a great heave and set him down on the bed alongside Sherlock. You'll be fine in the morning. Just sleep. Of course I'll be fine. I am fine. I'm absolutely fine, Sherlock muttered. You're fine. You are fine. Yes, you're great. Clearly, Amelia said, containing an eye roll. Now, I'll be sleeping in the living room if you need me. She snatched her pillow from the bed. Why would I need you? I don't need you. What good are you anyways? You didn't even know where she went. Amelia glimpsed at his sharp tone. No reason at all, she said curtly, slamming the door behind her. Too, as though knowing that his mistress was upset by Sherlock's words, bit Sherlock's hand. Sherlock yelped and kicked the dog off the bed, only for two to bite Sherlock's toes. Amelia barged back in a moment later. Oh, for heaven's sakes, why can't you two get along? Come on, two. You can sleep on Sherlock's chair. He won't be having any cases for a while, I don't think. She hesitated this time before closing the door. Good night, Sherlock. You're lovely, you know that, was his only response. That made her smile. Thank you, she said, shutting the door. Sherlock closed his eyes, and just then his phone lit up with a message. A loud, orgasmic sigh, a distinctly female one at that, filling the room. His eyes snapped open for a second time that night, and he fell out of the bed as he scrambled for his phone. He finally managed to retrieve it from his coat, which had mysteriously appeared on its usual hook on the door, despite the fact that Irene had stolen it. He leaned against the wall to read the text, too engrossed in the message to notice the lipstick stains around his mouth. Till next time, Mr. Holmes. Chapter 23. Be Alone Together. Amelia was slowly working her way through her third cup of coffee. A half-empty bowl of cereal was pushed to the side with a spoon drowned in the milk, and Amelia not wanting to fish it out. There were dark purple bags under her bleary eyes, and she struggled to keep her head upright. She had gone many sleepless nights without any repercussions, but the constant threat of Jim Moriarty plagued every waking hour, and even her dreams had been tainted by his influence. Everywhere she looked, she found a potential threat. For a moment, while lying awake, despite the fact that the rest of London was asleep, Amelia considered if she could even trust Mrs. Hudson. Certainly, she seemed like a sweet elderly lately, but Amelia was certain Miss Martha Louise Hudson could hold her ground. Sherlock had thankfully recovered from his drug stupor and was now reading today's newspaper, while John ate his breakfast, every clang of his fork against his plate deafening in the silence. In the corner, hovering as though he were Edgar Allan's Poe's raven with his occasional indigent squawks when no one listened to what he was saying, was Mycroft. Amelia wasn't entirely sure how he had gotten into the living room. Perhaps Mrs. Hudson had let him in which case she was most certainly working for Moriarty. After all, no one would, of their own free will, put Sherlock and Mycroft in the same room together. They were a ticking bomb, counting down the moments to ignition. To force them to talk to each other was to beg for a third world war, and Amelia would not allow for that to happen. Not in her living room. She grabbed her coffee and the woolen blanket draped over the back of John's chair, and nestled herself down in her own chair from where she could intervene if Sherlock suddenly decided to lunge at Mycroft's throat. The photographs are perfectly safe, announced Sherlock, not looking up from his newspaper. Mycroft, despite looking irritated, seemed relieved. He had been rambling, in Sherlock's words, about how Sherlock had failed. He believed that Irene Adler would exploit the photographs to any extent that she could, but refusing to take him seriously. Sherlock had ignored him. In the hands of a fugitive sex worker, said Mycroft, giving his younger brother a dark look. She's not interested in blackmail. Sherlock jumped at the opportunity to best his brother. She was protection. For some reason. I take it you've stood down the police investigation into the shooting at her house? Amelia raised her hands meek. Yeah, sorry about that. It seemed logical. They won't bother us again. Don't worry. How can we do anything while she has the photographs? Mycroft continued. Our hands are tied. Amelia interpreted their bickering once more, aiming to redirect the tension. Actually, theirs aren't. We've got to be concerned about our jobs, but I mean, it's not like John or Sherlock are working for the government. So long as they don't break the laws, we can't really stop them, can we? And even if they did break any laws, I'm sure we could find a way to work around it. They're in cheaply made handcuffs, and you and I both know that it would take John and Sherlock less than 5 seconds to break out of them. But you and I, we're bound and gagged. So why don't we let them do their jobs? She'd applaud your choice of words, Sherlock smirked at Amelia. He turned back to Mycroft. You see how this works? The camera phone is her get-out-of-jail-free card. You have to leave her alone. Treat her like royalty, Mycroft. He paused. Though not the way she treats royalty. And in that brief moment of silence, Sherlock's phone went off. The same orgasmic sigh he heard last night turned everyone's head to face him, in shock and their eyes wide. Amelia hesitated before asking, not sure if she wanted to know the answer. What was that? Tex. Sherlock tried to be casual, but it only earned him an even more scrutinizing glare from his brother. But what was that noise? Insisted John. She snorted. Please, don't be naive. You know what it was. I know what it was. Mycroft probably doesn't know because I don't think he's ever been with everyone. Oh, do give me some credit, Miss Watson, Mycroft said. I am human. Doubt it, she muttered as Sherlock stood up to retrieve his phone. Good morning, Mr. Holmes. Sherlock tried to ignore the message awaiting him. Did you know there are other people after her too, Mycroft? Before you sent John, Amy, and I in there? CIA trained killers at an excellent guess. He marched back to his seat, sitting down once more. John piped in with a sarcastic, yeah, thanks for that, Mycroft. Mrs. Hudson came into the room, carrying a tray with Sherlock's breakfast on it. Amelia couldn't help but think that for someone who claimed not to be their housekeeper, she did an awful lot more than a landlady did. Not that she was complaining. Mrs. Hudson's pleasant outlook on life was rather uplifting. John was always full of angst, Sherlock full of pessimists, and Mycroft was too uptight to admit that he enjoyed Amelia's company. It's a disgrace, tutted Mrs. Hudson in disapproval. Sending their little brother into danger like that. Family is all we have in the end, Mycroft Holmes. Oh, shut up, Mrs. Hudson, Mycroft snapped. Mycroft! Amelia and Sherlock shouted at the same time. Oi! John said just a moment after his sister and Sherlock. Mycroft tried not to cringe under Amelia's cold glare. Apologies, he said to Mrs. Hudson stiffly. Mrs. Hudson nodded. Thank you. Though do, in fact, shut up, Sherlock said, dodging to the side just as Amelia took off her shoe and threw it at his head. It ended up hitting two square in the nose. The dog letting out a startled yelp, and Amelia rushing over to console him with soft coos of reassurance. Sherlock's phone let out another sigh, stopping Mrs. Hudson dead in her tracks. Oh, it's a bit rude, that noise, isn't it? He paid no attention to Mrs. Hudson and checked his phone. Feeling better? There's nothing you can do. Sherlock looked back at Mycroft. And nothing she will do, as far as I can see. I can put maximum surveillance on her. Why bother? Amelia held too close as she scratched behind his ears. You can follow her on Twitter. I believe her username is the Whip Hand. Yes, most amusing, Mycroft said dryly, his own phone ringing. He took it out of his pocket. Excuse me. He walked into the hall. Hello? Amelia sighed as Sherlock frowned, curious as to what his brother was doing. Don't even bother asking me. I don't know what he's doing. Why does your phone make that noise? John asked suddenly, looking at Sherlock in interest. Sherlock struggled to come up with a suitable response. What noise? That noise, the one it just made, John answered. It's a text alert, Sherlock said. It means I've got a text. It's a text alert. Amelia said with a sly smile. Your texts don't usually make that noise. Well, Sherlock said, somebody got a hold of the phone and apparently, as a joke, personalized their text alert noise. Don't look at me, Amelia said. Both Sherlock and John's eyes drifted to her. It wasn't me, I swear. John said. So every time they text you, almost as if on cue, the alert rang out once again. It would seem so, Sherlock said with a small, quiet sigh. No doubt this was Irene Adler, back at her scandalous antics. He wondered if she had done so to get to him or to Amelia. He wasn't entirely sure which. Could you turn that phone down a bit? Mrs. Hudson requested. At my time of life. Sherlock dismissed her and glanced at his phone. I'm fine, since you didn't ask. I'm wondering who could have got hold of your phone, said Amelia, letting two go with great reluctance as he struggled to escape her iron grasp. Because it would have been in your coat, wouldn't it? Two started towards the kitchen, hopping onto one of the chairs and sniffing Sherlock's experiments on the table. Frantic, Amelia rushed over and pulled him down, ignoring the low, keening noise two let out. Sherlock watched the dog for a moment, then raised his newspaper. I leave you to your deductions. Amelia picked up the dog, resting his head against her shoulder. It was far more difficult to pick two up nowadays. He had gained plenty of weight since first arriving at Baker Street, with Mrs. Hudson constantly feeding him scraps. I'm not stupid, you know. Where do you get that idea? Sherlock said. Then quieter, I wouldn't keep you around if you were. Mycroft wandered back into the living room, still speaking on his phone. Bond errors go. That's decided. Check with the conventory lot. Talk later. What else does she have? Asked Amelia as Mycroft hung up. He gave her a quizzical glance, Amelia letting out a small sigh and adding on, Irene Adler. The Americans wouldn't be interested in her for a couple of compromising photographs. Hell, the Americans would only care if it threatens the safety of their own country, and at that point, they'd commit mass genocide to find the answer to their problems. So, I go back to my first point. There's more. Much more, Sherlock agreed, rising to his feet and taking slow, careful steps towards his stony-faced brother. Something big's coming, isn't it? Mycroft's lips pursed, the only sign of his irritation. Irene Adler is no longer any of your concern of yours. From now on, you two will stay out of this. Oh, will I? Said Amelia defiantly. Yes, Miss Watson, you will. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a long and arduous apology to make to a very old friend. Do give her my love, Sherlock said, picking up his violin, and began to play God Save the Queen at a loud and frantic pace. He followed Mycroft, ushering him out of the room, John grinning at their behavior. Sherlock turned to the window, still playing. He's hiding something. He is Mycroft, sure, Amelia shrugged. When is he not hiding something? By December, a thin sheet of white, fluffy snow had covered the streets of London. The heater of 221B had still not been fixed, and Amelia kept a fire raging in the fireplace, just to keep the trio from freezing. Sherlock hadn't had a case in weeks, and stayed holed up in his bedroom most of the time, hiding under the covers with two curled alongside him, as though the dog was a portable heater. The last case the trio had solved was, according to Sherlock, disappointingly simple, when Amelia had managed to coax Sherlock out of his room. He resorted to composing and playing sad, melodical tunes on his violin, sending the residents of 221B into depression. Thankfully, Christmas was coming, and Mrs. Hudson managed to cheer Sherlock enough to play Christmas carols for everyone. Quite frankly, Amelia had started to get sick of the Christmas songs, and was ready to take the violin and break it. Amelia sat on the floor of 221B, huddled in a thick woolen blanket before the fireplace. She clutched it tightly, listening to Sherlock play We Wish You a Merry Christmas on repeat. Thank you, John, Amelia said as John topped her glass of Chardonnay. If she was going to get through a Christmas party with Mrs. Hutchin, she planned in for a few hours from now, she'd have to rely on the alcohol to get her through. She folded up her blanket and placed it to the side as she realized she only had 2 hours until the other guests arrived. Well, Amelia downed the last of her wine. I promised Molly I'd meet up with her to get ready. I suppose I should head out. Hummed Sherlock, lowering his violin. Have fun. Amelia knit her brows at Sherlock's oddly polite remark, knotting her scarf around her neck and pulling on her coat. Do we need anything while I'm out? She asked. Milk, John said. We're always buying milk. Can't we just buy a cow and name her Bessie? Amelia muttered, grabbing her purse. Right, I'll see you two later. Sherlock, try not to kill anybody, and John, try to make sure he doesn't. John chuckled. I'll give it my best shot. You better, Amelia smirked, then whistled for two to come along. She slipped on his lead, then trotted down the stairs, slamming the door behind her. John made sure she'd left, peering out the window before he turned to Sherlock. You like her. Don't be absurd. You like games. I hardly think. Don't lie to me, Sherlock. Sherlock huffed and sitting down his violin. I admit I do enjoy her company. You slept with her. Social experiment. John threw his head back and laughed. Sure. He sat down in front of the fireplace, too tired to deal with his stubborn roommate. The fire crackled and popped, embers leaping into the chimney, shining as though they were stars trapped in the very room, then falling back to earth. The soft amber flames illuminating the spiraling dust motes. Please don't tell her. Sherlock's voice was soft and timid. He had returned to the curly-haired boy who had been teased by the other schoolchildren for being different. The boy Mycroft had dressed up in the finest clothes and told him that appearances were an armor. To look strong was to be strong. The same boy who had spent his days hiding from the others in the shade under the elm tree. Please don't tell Amelia. John had to fight back a smile. I won't, but you'll have to eventually. You can't just continue on like this. I will. John had never seen Sherlock this nervous. Just not yet. Sherlock looked out the window. Just not yet, he murmured. You look fine, Molly reassured, swatting Amelia's hand away as she tried to tug down the hem of her navy blue lace dress. How the bloody hell do people wear these things? She grumbled Amelia. It's not practical in the slightest. Molly laughed airily, with her form-fitting black dress, beehive-like hairstyle, large hoop earrings, and the silver ribbon pinned in her hair, that coordinated with the jeweled collar of her dress. Amelia looked ready for the party, while Molly looked ready for the party, while Amelia sulked at having been forced into a dress. "I'm serious, Molls," Amelia whined. "I don't like dresses." "You look good. Hush!" Molly nudged Amelia aside. "I'm sure Sherlock would like it." She snorted. "Please. I don't think Sherlock would notice what I'm wearing. Even if I showed up in Lady Gaga's meat dress." "It's you," Molly said. "He would notice." "Don't be ridiculous," Amelia dismissed. "I don't want to do this." "We have to. I can just pretend I had a heart attack. I'm sure that we wouldn't have to go." "Your brother is a doctor. You could probably fake the documents, couldn't you?" "It could work. I'm not helping you pretend you had a heart attack so you don't have to go to the party," Molly said sternly. She stuck her hand out. "Come on, Amelia. Everyone's waiting." Meanwhile, in the living room, Sherlock walked around playing We Wish You Merry Christmas for the umpteenth time. Lestrade, Mrs. Hudson, John, and John's girlfriend were quietly chatting, an activity Sherlock found menial and uninteresting. But without Amelia to interest him, Sherlock was becoming bored. He finished the song with a flourish, too engrossed in his own thoughts to continue any further. "Lovely," Mrs. Hudson appraised as Lestrade let out a low whistle. "Sherlock, that was lovely." "Marvellous," John agreed. Miss Hudson giggled. "I wish you could have worn the antlers." Sherlock didn't have the heart to tell her that the antlers were in fact a replica of Loki's helmet from the Avengers Amelia had bought for herself. "Some things," Sherlock said, "are best left to the imagination, Miss Hudson." "Mrs. H." John offered tea to the woman, sensing that she needed to sober up. "No, thank you, Sarah," Sherlock said politely as John's girlfriend, a woman with her brown hair pulled up in a bun, offered him mince pie and cake from a tray. As John's girlfriend's face fell in disappointment, John hurried over to her, slinging an arm around her shoulder to comfort her. No, said John. He's not good with names." No, Sherlock said. "I can get this." He narrowed his eyes as the woman sat the tray down, folding her arms. "No, Sarah was the doctor, then there was the one with the spots, and then there's the one with the nose, then who is after the boring teacher?" "Nobody," the woman said. "Jeanette!" Sherlock exclaimed. "Ah, the process of elimination." John led Jeanette away, and having nothing else to do, Sherlock looked up to the door as Molly and Amelia stepped into the room. Molly, carrying 2 bags full of presents. "Oh, dear Lord." "Hello, everyone," Molly said. "Sorry. Hello." "Hey," Amelia said, giving the group a small half-wave. It said on that door to just come up," Molly said, gesturing to the floor below. "Oh, everybody's saying hello to each other," Sherlock said as the group greeted both Amelia and Molly happily, although Amelia didn't return the excited greeting. "How wonderful." "Always a pleasure to see you too, Sherlock," Amelia said, sarcastic, as she hung up her coat. "Let me, John said, reaching to hang Molly's coat up to see Molly's short, black dress. "Holy Mary! Wow," Lestrade said in approval, his mouth falling open. "Having a Christmas drinks, then?" Amelia said, arching her eyebrow at Sherlock. Neither of them were particularly happy to be there. That much was evidenced by the fact that Sherlock hadn't changed from his tight-fitting shirt from earlier. "No stopping them, apparently," Sherlock said, taking a seat at the table. "It's the one day of the year where the boys have to be nice to me, so it's almost worth it," Mrs. Hudson tittered. "You okay?" Amelia asked cautiously as Sherlock started typing out something on John's laptop. The tension between them was thick and heavy, as it had been since the morning after they'd slept together, both of them trying to ignore what happened for the sake of their strictly professional relationship. "Yeah," Sherlock said, John looking over his shoulder. "The count on your blog still says 1,895. "Oh no," Amelia said, pressing a hand to her forehead. "Christmas is cancelled." "Oh, stop with the melodramatic," Sherlock shot at her. He scrolled through John's blog. "And you've got a photograph of me wearing that hat." "That's on me," Amelia said with a coy smirk. "People like the hat." "No, they don't," Sherlock objected. "What people?" Molly smiled at Sherlock's confusion, then faced Mrs. Hudson. "How's the hip?" "Ooh, it's atrocious." "Oh, it's atrocious," said Mrs. Hudson. "But thanks for asking." "I've seen much worse," Molly said. "But then I do post-mortems." Molly flushed, embarrassed. "Oh, God, sorry." "Don't make jokes, Molly," ordered Sherlock. "No, sorry," Molly said, looking apologetic. Lestrade handed her a glass of red wine. "Thank you. I wasn't expecting to see you. I thought you were going to be Dorset for Christmas." That's first thing in the morning," Lestrade replied, grinning. Me and the wife. We're back together. It's all sorted. No, she's sleeping with the PE teacher, Sherlock said, still looking at the computer. Rude, Amelia hissed between her teeth. Lestrade's gaze turning hard, and his smile becoming fixed. And John, Molly said, I hear you're off to Harriet's. Is that right? Yeah, John said. Amelia was complaining, Molly said. Amelia arched an eyebrow and coughed lightly, saying, First time ever, John said, sounding both proud and smug at the time. She's cleared up her act. She's off the booze. Nope, Amelia said, shaking her head and looking into the fire. Shut up, Ames, John said sternly, starting to get annoyed by her sister's unnecessary commentary. She glared at him, trying to remind him that Harriet was just as much her sister as was John's. Sorry. It's fine. I was being an arse, Amelia shrugged it off. I see you've got a new boyfriend, Molly. You're serious about him, Sherlock said, turning to face the brunette. Sorry, what? In fact, Sherlock continued on, ignoring John's warning glare, you're seeing him this very night and giving him a gift. Amelia rolled her eyes. Oh, take a day off. Lestrade walked over, placing a glass next to Sherlock. Shut up and have a drink, he ordered, trying to get Sherlock to stop his deductions. Oh, come on, said Sherlock. Surely you've all seen the present at the top of the bag, perfectly wrapped with a bow. All the others are slapdash at best. He walked towards Molly and her bag full of gifts, not understanding why Amelia had, out of the blue, gone still. If it's for someone special, Sherlock picked up the gift. The shade of red echoes her lipstick, and though it's a few shades darker, either an unconscious association or one that she's deliberately trying to encourage. Either way, Miss Hooper has love on her mind. The fact that she's serious about him is clear from the fact that she's giving him a gift at all. Amelia gave John a pleading look, and it took John a moment to understand. The coloring of the wrapping paper was meant to be a few shades darker, and it was not meant to match Molly's. It was meant to match Amelia's. John opened his mouth to say something, but Charlotte cut him off by saying that would suggest long-term hopes, however forlorn, and that she's seeing him tonight is evident from her makeup and what she's wearing. Sherlock smiled, thinking how correct he was in his deductions, when he couldn't have been more wrong. Sherlock turned over the tack, obviously trying to compensate for the size of her mouth and breasts. His voice failed him as he read the card. Dearest Sherlock, thank you for always being there for me. Love, Amelia. Amelia covered her mouth with her hand, trying to rub off her accursed lipstick. It hadn't been her idea to match the wrapping to her lipstick. It had been Molly's, and now Amelia was at a complete loss as to what to do. She let out a shaky breath as Amelia turned around, grim-faced as he realized the answer had been staring him in the face all along. You act like you don't have feelings, Amelia said, sounding more sad than angry. So you always say such horrible things. Every time. Always. She pursed her red-stained lips. Always. I am sorry. His own words took him by surprise. Forgive me. He took a hesitant step towards Amelia, cupping her chin with his hand. Merry Christmas, Amelia Watson. He leaned forward, placing a small, soft kiss on her lips. The silence was broken by Sherlock's phone, the orgasmic sigh startling all of them. No, Amelia said in shock, briefly forgetting that it had nothing to do but it was nothing but an alert. That wasn't I didn't No, Sherlock confirmed, seeing Lestrade and Molly shocked. It was me. My God, really? Exclaimed Lestrade. What? Molly said. My phone, Sherlock said, trying to not roll his eyes at the others. He reached into his pocket, taking his phone out. He looked back at Amelia. We'll talk later. 57, John said suddenly, giving no context as to what he was speaking about. Sorry, what? Sherlock said. 57 of those texts, John said. The ones I've heard. Sherlock looked down at the message, well aware that Amelia was peering over her shoulder to read the message, which read, Mantelpiece. Amelia frowned in confusion, but remained silent, not wanting to question Sherlock. Thrilling that you've been counting, Sherlock said to John sarcastically, walking towards the mantel. Amelia's silvery eyes watched him as he did so, wondering why Sherlock's hands were shaking ever so slightly. Sherlock picked up a small box covered in wrapping paper, the color of blood, tied with a simple black string. Sherlock's eyes glanced towards Amelia, wondering if she had given it to him. Perhaps the wrapping was mirroring her own day-to-day lipstick, but then realized that she had already given him a gift, and that when he recalled Irene's Adler blood-red lips. Excuse me. What's up, Sherlock? Amelia asked, falling silent when a small scrap of wrapping paper fluttered to the ground. She picked it up, closing her eyes as she came to the same conclusion that Sherlock had. I said, excuse me. Do you ever reply? Amelia called after him. Sherlock paid her no heed, storming into their bedroom. He shoved two off the bed and sat down on the bed. He hesitated before opening the box. He could have sworn his heart skipped a beat as his gaze fell upon Irene Adler's camera phone. Sherlock peered closer, examining it, then staring off into the distance. Amelia knocked on the door. Sure? When he didn't respond, she took a seat on the floor before his feet. She's dead, isn't she? I would assume so. She grabbed Sherlock's phone from the nightstand and dialed Mycroft's personal number. Your parents with Molly, your presence with Molly, if you want to go get it. He nodded and left the room. Oh dear Lord, Mycroft said as he answered the phone, presuming it was his brother calling. We're not going to have Christmas phone calls now, are we? Have they passed a new law? Hello to you too, Mycroft, said Amelia. You really should be nicer to your brother, you know. Miss Watson, why are you calling me at this ungodly hour? You are aware that your work day officially ends at 4:30? I think you're going to find Irene Adler tonight, Amelia said, eyes flicking up as Sherlock hovered in the doorway, holding a new violin bow, and the sheet music to several songs Amelia had composed. We already know where she is, Mycroft said. As you were kind enough to point out, it hardly matters. No, Amelia said. She hesitated before adding on. I mean, you're going to find her dead. Chapter 20... Oh. Wait. Okay. Chapter 24. I Feel Everything. Amelia picked up her mobile phone, holding it to her ear. She didn't need to check the caller ID to know it was Mycroft. He's on his way, the oldest Holmes said to his colleague. Have you found anything? No, Amelia said with a loud sigh. She and the others, mostly John, had searched the flat for Sherlock's hidden stash of cigarettes. Amelia knew where Sherlock had hidden them, but chose to remain silent as watching John search for Sherlock's stash was far too amusing. Did he take the cigarette? Yes. Shit, Amelia cursed. She knew Sherlock hadn't taken her car and started to estimate how long it would take Sherlock to return to 221B. She quickly figured it out and looked to Mrs. Hudson. He's coming. 10 minutes. There's nothing in the bedroom, she informed. Looks like he's clean, for once, Amelia said in surprise. They've tried all the usual places. Are you sure tonight's a danger night? No, Mycroft admitted. But then, I never am. You have to stay with him, Amelia. I've got plans, Amelia mumbled. You wanted me to come into work. No, Mycroft said simply. He needs you, and quite frankly, you need him as well. Mycroft, Amelia said as Mycroft hung up her. Fucking hell! She threw her mobile down on the ground in her anger, frustrated with him. Mycroft may have been politer than his brother, but Amelia still found him incredibly annoying. I am really sorry, John apologized, sitting down next to his girlfriend in an attempt to avoid the impending conversation with his sister. You know, my friends are so wrong about you, Jeanette said tearfully. How pitiful, Amelia thought with distaste. The night seemed to have gotten to Jeanette as she wasn't taking it well. Amelia really didn't understand why Jeanette was reacting this way. It wasn't like they'd witnessed a murder. All they found was the phone of a dead woman and searching the flat for cigarettes. John said in confusion, raising his eyebrow at his girlfriend. You're a great boyfriend, Jeanette continued. Oh, that's good, John said relieved. I mean, I always thought I was great. And Sherlock Holmes is a very lucky man, Jeanette said sadly. Amelia let out a loud snort, realizing where Jeanette was headed. She covered her mouth with her hand, flushing red. She wasn't quite sure as to why most people thought John and Sherlock were together. As far as she knew, neither of them were gay, nor bi. Jeanette, please, John groaned. No, I mean it, Jeanette said bitterly, pulling on her shoes on. It's heartwarming. You'll do anything for him, and he can't even tell your girlfriends apart. Because in the grand scheme of things, you're really quite insignificant, Amelia said poignantly, rolling her eyes as Lestrade, Miss Hudson, and Molly and John shot her a glare. Despite this, Amelia continued on, and you're really not that memorable. Ames, John hissed, chasing after his girlfriend as she headed to the door, pulling her coat on while she did so. No, I'll do anything for you. Just tell me what it is I'm not doing. Tell me. Don't make me compete with Sherlock Holmes, Jeanette said with clenched teeth. I'll walk your dog for you, John offered. Hey, I've said it now. I'll even walk your dog. I don't have a dog, Jeanette shouted. Idiot, Amelia said with a smirk, once again ignoring the glare she earned from the others. No, because that was the last one. Okay, John said tiredly, exasperatedly letting out a breath. Jesus, Jeanette said, grabbing her back and storming out. I'll call you, John said weakly, attempting to fix his mistakes. No, Jeanette yelled back at John. Okay, John said sadly, turning to face the others as Jeanette ran down the stairs 2 at a time, violently slamming the door behind her. Amelia shrugged half-heartedly when John eyed her accusingly. That really wasn't very good, was it? Miss Hudson said, sympathetically, worried for John. Amelia laughed loudly, throwing her head back. But at least it was one hell of a dramatic exit. Amelia Laura Watson! John shouted venomously, containing his fury. John, Amelia replied smoothly, arching her eyebrow. Is there something wrong? Thankfully, before John could answer, Sherlock came lopping up the stairs with an amused smile on his face, and faintly smelling of tobacco. Amelia turned to him with a wide smile. Oh, hi. Sherlock glanced around the room, his sharp, eagle-like eyes seeing everything. He noticed his skull slightly positioned askew, as if someone had picked it up and searched under it. A small, clean patch of floor it signified the moving of the coffee table, and one of the couch cushions had fallen onto the floor, as if someone had frantically looked for something. You okay? Amelia said worriedly. Sherlock turned to John and glared at him violently. Hope you didn't mess up my sock index this time. He walked to his bedroom, firmly closing the door behind him. Amelia followed after him, groaning to herself as she found the door locked. She picked it with her fingernail and forced her way in. Her eyes fell upon Sherlock, who sat on the bed, his knees pulled up to his chest. Hey, Sherl. Sherlock raised his eyebrow at his new nickname, but gave Amelia no other indication he had been listening. Amelia sat down next to Sherlock, placing her hand through Sherlock's. She rubbed circles on the back of Sherlock's hand, confidently, unsure of what else to say or do. Thank you, Sherlock said suddenly. For not telling them where you hid your cigarettes, Amelia said quizzically. For everything, Sherlock replied smoothly. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Amelia Watson, I do not know what I would have done without you. Amelia's cheeks turned red. You're the one who let me stay here. Nonetheless, Sherlock said, a few people would have been able to put up with me for so long. I like you, sure, Amelia said. You're honest, and you're not afraid of what people think of you. And maybe that's not as bad as people make it to be. The next morning, Sherlock stood by the window of 221B's living room, playing a sad, slow melody on his violin, with the bow Amelia had gotten him from the night before. Amelia walked into the living room, a small sigh escaping her mouth as she looked at Sherlock, then to John, who sat in his usual seat by the fireplace. Amelia's eyes flickered to dirty ashes littering the kitchen table. Not hungry, Amelia guessed, seeing that Sherlock hadn't eaten his breakfast. Sherlock ignored her and continued playing. Amelia letting out a small hum of acknowledgement. Lovely tune, Sherlock, Mrs. Hudson said, as Sherlock made a notion of a piece of sheet music. Haven't heard that one before. You composing? John asked. Helps me to think, John muttered, playing the same tune once again. What are you thinking about? John questioned, as Amelia sat down in her seat, folding her hands in her lap. Sherlock spun around quickly, placing his violin down. He pointed to John's laptop, his eyes lit with excitement. The counter on your block is still stuck at 1,895, he said quickly, spitting the words out from between his teeth. Yeah, it's faulty. Can't seem to fix it, John said with a nod, sounding bitter about the thought. Faulty, Sherlock said as he took out Irene's phone. Or you've been hacked and it's a message. Amelia said with a raised brow as Sherlock pulled up the lock screen, typing in the following. I am 1895 locked. The phone let out a warning beep and vibrated in Sherlock's hand, a message popping up with the screen reading, Wrong passcode, 3 attempts remaining. Sherlock's excitement died, his smile falling. Just faulty. He turned around, picking up his violin once again. Right, John said with a small nod. Right, well, I'm going out for a bit. He walked over to Mrs. Hudson as Amelia started to quickly chat with Sherlock, her eyes occasionally flicking to John. Listen, John said in a soft voice, ignoring the fact that Amelia and Sherlock were talking about him. Has he ever had any kind of girlfriend-boyfriend relationship ever? I don't know. I suppose he has Amelia, Mrs. Hudson said, pursing her lips. How can we not know? John said, sounding frustrated. He sighed, glancing at his sister as she laughed to something Sherlock had said. Sherlock smiling at her kindly. He's Sherlock, Mrs. Hudson said simply. I think Amelia understands him, but how will we ever know what's going on in that funny old head? John fell silent for a moment, silently agreeing with her. Right, John announced. See ya. He went down the stairs, leaving Mrs. Hudson, Sherlock, and his sister alone. As soon as John had closed the door, Amelia burst into a fit of laughter. Mrs. Hutchins and Sherlock's eyes snapped at her quizzically. Amelia shook her head in reply, still chuckling. She glanced down at her phone as it buzzed. Mycroft's car is waiting outside. Come with J.W. Be there in a moment. A.W. Is this really necessary? Yes, J.W. I hate you. A.W. Amelia turned off her phone, tucking it in her pocket. Sorry, she said to Sherlock, an apologetic look in her eyes. Mycroft wants me. Amelia's phone vibrated again. Trust me, I know. J.W. Amelia sighed, grabbing her coat and pulling it on. She waved half-heartedly and slid into the car waiting outside, not giving a second to the fact that not Athena wasn't sitting beside John. 10 minutes later, at an undisclosed location. He's writing sad music, Amelia said as she walked through the building, not recognizing where she was, but it was typical of Mycroft to choose obscure places to meet. Doesn't eat, barely talks, only to correct the television. Or to flirt with you, John muttered. Shut up, I'm talking, Amelia said dismissively, continuing to walk into the room. I say he was heartbroken, but he wasn't that attached to her, and well, he's Sherlock. He does all that anyways. A strange feeling of suspicion nagged at her, and it wasn't until Irene Adler stepped out of the shadows did she understand why. Gut feeling, Amelia had learned long ago, were not intuition or miracle guess. They were, in fact, the subconscious's observance and conclusions on the matter at hand. This was one of the many reasons as to why Amelia was such an accomplished agent. She trained her subconscious to speak out in times she needed it most, giving her an advantage over weaker-minded opponents. Perhaps this is why she found Sherlock so intriguing. He challenged her intellect in ways she thought impossible, questioning her every move. He expected and demanded more of her, and he never ceased to surprise Amelia. Hello, Dr. Watson, Irene said calmly, turning to Amelia. Agent Watson, I didn't expect to see you here. Amelia gritted her teeth, the two women glaring at each other without blinking, both of them waiting for the other to look away first. Irene blinked, losing the competition with Amelia, causing Amelia's form to relax slightly. Tell him you're alive, she ordered in a low growl. He'd come after me, Irene said, shaking her head. I'll come after you if you don't, Amelia threatened, reaching for the throwing knife tucked in the top of her boot. I believe you, Irene said, though I'm not sure what your brother would say to his sister hunting me down. You were dead on a slab, John said, wanting to add something to the conversation. It was definitely you. DNA tests are only as good as the records you keep, both Amelia and Irene said at the same time. And I bet you know the record keeper, John said sarcastically. I know what he likes, and it needed to disappear, Irene said almost instantly, her voice dropping with sickly sweetness. Amelia let out a long breath, arching her eyebrow at Irene. Then how come I can see you, and I don't even want to? Look, I made a mistake, Irene admitted. I sent something to Sherlock for safekeeping, and now I need it back, so I need your help. Amelia's thoughts went back to Irene's phone, which was currently in Sherlock's possession. No, she said simply, crossing her arms over her chest. She knew she'd have to watch her tongue if both Amelia and John were to get out of this talk unharmed. She ran through her mental list of the weapons she had on her. Throwing knives, top left boot, silhouette, right leg of jean, pistol, backstrap of bra, waistband of jeans, inside pocket of coat. Pocket knife, secret compartment in the heel of right boot. If it's for his own safety, it's for his own safety, Irene insisted, snapping Amelia's concentration. So's this. Tell him you're alive, Amelia snapped in anger, clenching her fists to keep from reaching for her throwing knives and killing Irene herself. I can't, Irene said, looking to John for help. Fine, Amelia said sharply. I'll tell him, and I still won't help you. She turned on her heels, flipping her hair over the shoulder, heading to the door. What do I say? Irene asked as John followed after his sister. What do you normally say? Amelia said in fury, spinning around to glare at Irene. You've texted him a lot. Just the usual stuff, Irene said, taking out her phone. There is no usual in this case, John said quietly, regretting his actions almost immediately as Amelia turned her glare on him. Good morning, Irene read from her phone. I like your funny hat. I'm sad tonight, let's have dinner. A small smile grew on Irene's mouth as Amelia looked round at her, seeming both appalled and shocked. You looked sexy on Crime Watch, let's have dinner, Irene continued. I'm not hungry, let's have dinner. You flirted with Sherlock Holmes, John said. At him, Irene corrected. He never replies. No, John said quickly. Sherlock always replies to everything. He's Mr. Punchline. He will outlive God trying to have the last word. Does that make me special? I don't know, Amelia hissed. Maybe. Are you jealous? Irene questioned, her blue eyes locked on Amelia's. We're not a couple, Amelia said instantly. Yes, you are, Irene said. She showed Amelia the screen of her phone. I'm not dead. Let's have dinner. She dramatically pressed send, and her eyes still on Amelia's. He's Sherlock Holmes, for Christ's sake, the consulting detective. Who the hell knows what goes on in his psychopathic brain of his? He doesn't even care about anyone or anything, let alone me. Irene chuckled. He loves you. He's just too scared to admit it. The man who always believes that love was a chemical defect, falling for a woman no more virtuous than him. It's odd with you, Watsons, though. Irene turned to look at John. Both of you falling for the man who society has cast out. Who the hell knows about Sherlock Holmes? John said stiffly. But, for the record, if anyone out there still cares, I'm not actually gay. Well, I am. Look at us three, Irene said pointedly. Amelia laughed hollowly, the sound dying off as Sherlock's ringtone for Irene rang out in the otherwise silent building. Amelia's hand flew up to her mouth in shock as she heard Sherlock storm off. She headed towards him, John catching her arm and holding her back. I don't think so, Irene said, voicing her thoughts John's. Do you? Let me go, Amelia demanded as she forced her way out of John's grasp, chasing after the consulting detective. She ran through the building, searching for Sherlock. She let out a pained scream as she tumbled down a small flight of stairs, spraining her ankle in this process. She collapsed as her legs were suddenly unable to support her, landing on one of her hands and crushing the palm into the mesh floor, drawing blood. Sherlock ran to her side, gingerly picking her up and worrying for her safety. Amelia let out a weak laugh, the sound feeble and soft. Probably I should have started with that. Wouldn't save me the trouble of chasing you. Sherlock rolled his eyes slightly, helping her up. You were calling my name, he prompted, tilting his head and looking in slight confusion. I forgot what I was going to say, Amelia grumbled. Ah, screw it. She violently crashed her lips on Sherlock's, adrenaline fueling her. His lips were soft and tasted of coffee she had forced Sherlock to drink in the morning. She ran a hand through his hair, grabbing his curls to ensure he wouldn't pull away. After some while, Amelia broke the kiss, pressing her forehead against Sherlock's. I don't care if you say you're a sociopath, that you don't feel love, because I do feel it. I feel everything, and I know you do too, but it scares you. And right now, I'm calling your bluff, Sherlock. You're not a psychopath. You're not a sociopath. You're my friend, the one person I trust. So do me a favor, sure? Trust me. Trust that this will work out. Sherlock fell silent for a moment. Of course,